And welcome back to an episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We host Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Michael, second week of training camp in the books. Green and white practice went pretty well. We're back on our Monday schedule. How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling pretty good. Like I think many Jets fans are right now because the positivity has just been flowing in throughout the entire offseason, but it really has carried over into training camp and into this green and white scrimmage from a couple of days ago. I was at the green and white scrimmage last year. I didn't go to the one this year, but it was still a positive vibe. But I think the offense definitely struggled last year. Zach Wilson had a rough practice for the most part, but this year it felt like a totally different vibe in terms of how he was playing and how the offense was playing, which of course we'll get into. But yeah, there's a lot of positive energy right now, and like you're trained as a Jets fan to kind of wait for that shoe to drop where it's like, all right, this is too good right now. When's it all going to come crashing down? But right now it's smooth sailing, so I'm just enjoying these moments right now.
Yeah, and we do have a mailbag today, a lot of questions, so we want to get to that. But let's talk a little bit about the green and white scrimmage. Like you said, last year Zach Wilson really struggled, and I have to say, in my entire time as a Jets fan since they've been doing the scrimmage, going even all the way back to Hard Knocks, I'm pretty sure the offense has gotten dominated every year. I can't really remember a time where the offense actually looked pretty good in this green and white scrimmage. If I'm mistaken, somebody let me know. So last year was obviously really bad from Zach. I remember I think our podcast was like, don't overreact. He's a rookie, first time playing a stadium, whatever. But as a whole, just ignoring Zach, just thinking about the offense, the fact that the offense was able to move the ball. And it's not like this defense is, this defense isn't a slouch. They have an amazing pass rush and a great secondary. In the run game, they might have some questions, but there's no denying the talent on the Jets defense. And you saw it in this practice as well. I feel like most practices this offseason have been pretty balanced. Offense has had some good days. The defense has had some good days. But it's just awesome to see Zach performing in a stadium environment with the fans around. Didn't look too good last year. This is also the first event for, there are a lot of Jets fans that like aren't on Twitter, maybe don't listen to podcasts, whatever. And this is them just going to the green and white scrimmage, see what's up. And this is their first time to really see Zach in a while. So there's some pressure there. Does it mean that he's going to have a great season, the fact that he had a good scrimmage? No, but if he was really struggling, of course you'd be trying to downplay it, but it would be a negative sign. You can read into the fact that his second week of practice, this camp has been really good. I think he's stacked together a lot of consistent days. You want to see that, especially through this next week into the preseason game. We'll see how much he plays and into the joint practices. But, week one for Zach seemed pretty solid. Week two seems like things are moving a little faster. Things are starting to click. And yeah, I'm really happy with the result of Saturday's scrimmage. I know he had the one interception. I didn't really see a great angle on it. It does look like it was probably his fault. He was a little out route to Uzama, just behind the linebacker, dropped into coverage and got it. Uzama looked a little slow coming out of the break there. So, but you'll take, those types of plays. Obviously it's not great, but nobody's expecting Zach to be perfect. But if we can get more of the quarterback we saw against Tampa Bay last year, just that consistency, that he doesn't look completely overwhelmed and outmatched. Looks like he's getting through his progressions and his reads. Looks like he's playing with confidence. Because even in that game, he kind of lost it for him at the end with that 4th and 1, and he had a few passes that he missed and a few passes that were almost intercepted. But it was just the level of confidence and calmness that he was playing with that you felt he had a handle on this offense. And if you can see that in these games this year, even when he makes mistakes, I think you have to be happy. And I think this second week of practice has been a lot of the Tampa Bay version of Zach. So that's what I'm excited about so far. But as Allen Iverson says, we're talking about practice. Michael, before we get to the mailbag, any other thoughts on the green and white scrimmage, whether it's Zach performance? I know there's that clip of Sauce Gardner guarding Elijah Moore, and you really get a sense of the talent of Sauce Gardner and the fact that he's able to keep up with these smaller, shiftier, faster guys, because you already know with his frame that, he's going to do just fine against the big guys. It's how does he go up against Tyreek Hill twice a year? It's one little clip, but throughout practice, we've seen beat reporters just talk about the fluidity in his lower half, and it's so rare for a guy like that. So between Zach, Sauce, and anything else, what were your takeaways from primarily the green and white scrimmage, but I guess the second week of practice as a whole?
Well, I think in terms of Zach's green and white performance, you mentioned the Tampa Bay game, and I do think it was very similar to the quarterback we saw in that one. There weren't a ton of huge plays in this game. He did take a few shots. If there was, I'm not sure how many people saw it because all the footage from this is just, fan videos that are kind of hidden beneath the surface on Twitter, but we were able to find a bunch of them. So it feels like we watched the whole thing. But there was one deep shot he took to Garrett Wilson that he almost completed. Gardner in tight coverage. It was a great throw. They just barely missed it. But other than that, it was pretty similar to the Bucks game where, they didn't make a ton of big plays in that Bucks game. It was very methodical. It was efficient. It was a lot of between the numbers passing. It was quick.
Timing.
And yeah, the timing was great. And I think we saw that carry over into this practice. And I know it wasn't a dominant offensive practice. The defense did kind of take over in the latter portion of the practice. But I do think, like, you just look at the clips that are out there and his timing with his receivers was good. It feels like, the way some of the stuff we talked about last week when we were pointing out, what should you look at in terms of how you evaluate him? What can we look at that is transferable and tangible regarding his progress and where he is as a quarterback? And I think in a lot of those areas, he did look really good. Just, getting the ball out as quickly as he should, accuracy on short throws, good decision-making, being safe with the ball. Although the interception was not good, and it's one that he's got to erase from his game. It was kind of similar to the one he threw against the Panthers last year. Linebacker is on the line of scrimmage, then he drops. Zach doesn't see it. He undercuts the throw. But we're not expecting him to throw 2 interceptions this year. He's going to turn the ball over. But if he can make up for that with just consistency and good command and leadership of the offense, which I think we've seen more of throughout the past few practices, then I think you can live with the turnovers, and he could still have a very good second season. And he didn't turn it over that much last season. Like he made some bad throws. He wasn't Aaron Rodgers again with like 3 picks the whole year, but he was I believe in the top half of the league in terms of his interception rate being below average. So he didn't throw a ton of picks, and if he could stay in that range, improve on it a little bit, that would be a nice step forward. So, he wasn't top half of the league. He was kind of close to the bottom, but 11 picks in 13 games, not disastrous. We've seen worse. But yeah, overall, I think.
Hold on. I want to go ahead. This. His last year at BYU, he only threw 3 interceptions, and then the second half of last year, he took care of the ball extremely well. So the narrative that he's a turnover-prone quarterback was really just conjured up in the beginning of the season. He had the awful game against the Patriots. He threw some interceptions against the Broncos and the Falcons. And so that narrative was built up, but really after coming back from injury, you didn't really see those turnovers as much. And even like he had the dumb little flip one against Houston that people criticized him for. And like that one, I didn't really feel like was as bad as people made it out to be. I don't think Zach will be a turnover prone quarterback to the likes that we've seen other Jets quarterbacks be, but I don't think he's, like you said, like you'll live with some mistakes, but I don't think people should be expecting Zach to be like, a Brett Favre type of quarterback where he's constantly throwing across. Like he'll take those chances and he'll throw interceptions, but I don't think he's a guy that's going to throw 15, 16, 17 interceptions in a season. Like I really do kind of feel like his touchdown to interception ratio should be pretty solid as a pro. But anyways, we're talking about practice here. But sorry, you were going to go on about the rest of the team.
Yeah, and just to sum up on Wilson, I think he has the potential to balance it really well, both ends of the quarterback spectrum, because we know what he can do as a street ball quarterback. We saw it early last season. We saw it at BYU. We know how good of an athlete he is, how strong his arm is. We know he can do those things, and you don't want to hold him back from doing that. He's definitely going to take his shots, and sometimes there will be turnovers, but if he can outweigh that with more good than bad, it can be a plus. And then at the same time, he does have the ability to be a good pocket quarterback, a guy who gets the ball out quickly, works between the numbers, works the flats, just a quick intermediate stuff, and move the ball that way. That's what we saw in the second half of the season, especially the Bucks game. So he's the potential to do both things pretty well. And I think this year, the big key is finding a way to balance those two things. And you mentioned, the turnovers decreasing second half of last season. I just ran the numbers a little bit. So if you just take out the 4 picks against the Patriots, and obviously those count, it's not like you can just erase them from memory. But, if you do take those out, in the rest of his games, only 7 picks on 350 passes. That's only 2% of his passes, which would have tied for 12th best in the league last year. So it really is that one game that kind of created that perception. Again, it happened. It's something he's got to improve on. You're going to play the Pats again this year. Got to be better. But that one game did kind of inflate everything a little bit in terms of the interception category. But to move on to the rest of the team, Sauce Gardner, I think, is stealing the show so far. And for me, I think I've said it a few times on here. I think it's fair to expect that he's going to have growing pains this year against a tough schedule, being a rookie corner, which might be the toughest position to play as a rookie outside of quarterback. But the way he's playing so far, he's looked ready, and he's playing against good competition in Elijah Moore, who stole the training camp spotlight last offseason and largely has this season as well. He's playing against good competition, and also a guy in Elijah Moore who should be a tough matchup for him as a much smaller, slightly faster player. I say slightly because Gardner's so fast himself, but yeah, there were a lot of good reps that were shared from him in this scrimmage against Garrett Wilson, against Elijah Moore, just, staying square, staying attached to the hip, and, just reps where he's providing really tight coverage. And I don't think there were any big time pass deflections or interceptions or anything he made in this practice, but a lot of incompletions in his direction just because of his tight coverage, making things difficult. And I think that's something he has the potential to do very well, thanks to the combination of his frame and his athletic ability. So I've been impressed with Sauce so far. How about you?
Yeah, obviously there's been a few stars of camp, and we talked about them on Wednesday, but it seems like the guys who have gotten the most attention are Elijah Moore, Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, Carl Lawson. And I think you can throw in, I'm about to talk about him next, but Tyler Conklin, Breece Hall. So the players that you'd want to see are on that list. And then even guys like Garrett Wilson and Jermaine Johnson are flashing pretty consistently. And that throw you talk about to Garrett Wilson, I mean, the hands on Garrett Wilson are something special. And I think one of the things that you saw with Zach at BYU is when he really trusted his receiver to go up and get a ball. Obviously his performances skyrocketed that last season at BYU because of that. And Garrett Wilson is the perfect receiver to go and get those balls top shelf. And it was ruled out of bounds, but if you look, it was out of bounds, but it was a great throw, great catch. That's a good rep. And I think that's one that builds up that confidence. I do have a few other takeaways. One about Zach, and then, most of them are kind of connected to Zach, I guess. And then we can move on to the mailbag. One of the things that I was encouraged by, and look, we're talking about practice here. It is kind of crazy that this is what football is during training camp, where it's like everybody reacts to every rep. And this is the time for these guys to get better and establish chemistry. But one of the things that I did notice in this scrimmage that I was liked, and I think we've talked about it back in the spring, was I wanted to see Zach use his mobility and his athleticism a little bit more. Like, he's never going to be Lamar Jackson, but there were certainly many times last year where he had the opportunity to scramble and pick up a first down, but instead he wanted to throw it. Or there were times for him to pick up even more yards. Like there's that obvious one against the Saints where he might have been able to score a touchdown, but he slid really early. And it was still a 20-yard run, but it could have been a 50-yard touchdown like he had against the Jags. But it's not even just to run and get positive yards. It's also to run around the behind the line of scrimmage and create those throwing angles. And his athleticism in the pocket is one of his best traits. I think you really saw that week one. I actually feel like that was arguably his best game. And part of it was just because he was under so much duress the entire game, but you got to see how slippery he was, getting away from defenders and running around. And that's when some of those magic moments happen. But in this scrimmage, I think you saw him do that a lot, where the pocket might have collapsed. He'd move around. He'd step up. He wasn't just constantly fading back. Like there's good and bad movement in the pocket. And you can fade back for a little bit, but if your quarterback's pocket movement is basically just to keep drifting backwards, it's not going to be great. You saw Zach stepping up, sidestepping, creating a different throwing lane. This is something that Saleh talked about. And then he even had a few rushes. I think he rushed like 4 times. And, as long as he's protecting himself, as long as he's avoiding taking a ton of those unnecessary hits that you don't want to see your franchise quarterback take, it is a great thing for him to run because it opens up the offense. Because now those linebackers have to think about Zach taking off. And that opens up that intermediate, over the middle type of throws that we've seen Zach kind of excel at towards the end of last year and see him excelling at in training camp. So Zach's mobility was kind of a positive sign in the scrimmage. again, nobody can hit him. Nobody can tackle him. So does that change when the pads come on? Maybe, but I think this is a trait you've already seen from his rookie year and in college. And it's like, I'd love to see him implement it more because it'll give him easier completions. One of the other things, and there's another positive and then one negative, the Tyler Conklin connection. And we talked about it a few weeks ago. We kind of thought Tyler Conklin could be a star of training camp, and he certainly was the star of Saturday night. It seems to me that he's outperforming Uzama, which is something you called early. That's no slight to Uzama. I think he's a good tight end, and I think both of them are going to have plenty of action. But it seems like Conklin has solidified himself as the top tight end. And when you look at the money, you can make a case that Conklin so far, again, it's August 7th, so far is per price maybe the best free agent signing the Jets had this offseason. If he performs like we're maybe expecting him to be that tight end number one, to be that safety blanket for Zach, to be a guy who alleviates the Jets' issues at tight end that they've had for the last decade or so. Just when you factor in the price tag, because obviously there are plenty of other great free agent signings, but certainly something to keep an eye out for. Even like, I'm trying to think who tweeted this out, but there was a clip of Zach throwing to Tyler Conklin in 7-on-7s. And it was just like a little wheel route, fade route for Tyler Conklin. Zach Wilson, perfect back shoulder, leads him perfectly for Conklin to go up and get it. And then you just see Conklin high point that ball. And it's 7-on-7s, no pass rush, but I was watching that. I was like, that's exciting. The Jets have not at a tight end go up and get those types of balls since, I don't know, Justin Keller maybe. So really excited about that connection. And then the other thing before we get to the mailbag is the drops, Michael. How concerned were you about that? It seems like drops hasn't been too big of an issue in these practices, but on Saturday it clearly was. Zach Wilson's numbers for, a scripted, well, it wasn't all scripted, but for a practice is pretty dumb to track, but it would have made his numbers a lot better. I think he had 4 or 5 drops and a few of them were big plays and nice throws. So are you concerned at all about the drops? Salah was talking about like the depth perception. Do you think he's just making an excuse, or do you think, yet again, we'll have to deal with great Zach throw and drops by his receiver? What do you think?
For the Salah comment, I'm going to be honest. It's funny you brought that up because when I saw that yesterday, I definitely laughed out loud. I think that's a little bit of an excuse, to be honest. But, the player who concerns me the most, in terms of the drops is because some of the drops, if Jeff Smith drops a pass, a guy at that level, it's like, whatever, because they're not, if they are playing, the season's off the rails anyway because of injuries. So it is what it is. But Corey Davis had a drop in a 2-minute drill near the end of the practice that it was just very reminiscent of some of the passes he was dropping last season. It was a 2-minute drill. Zach had actually just hit Davis on a pretty decent gain the play before that. But he dropped it in. I think it was a dig route. It's probably about 15, 20 yards. Zach dropped it in the middle of, I think, 4 different zone defenders right in the middle of the field, kind of put it a little bit back shoulder. So, Davis was going towards the dropping safety. You don't want to lead him into the safety. So Zach puts it a little bit behind him so he could slow his momentum and grab that ball, hits him on the numbers, a little bit of an awkward angle because, again, the slowing momentum to protect him, but hits him on the numbers and he goes for the body catch and he drops it. So, I don't think Davis has consistently dropped passes based on what I've been reading and seeing, but drops like that are concerning because
we're drops an issue. It's my bad. Were drops an issue for him in Tennessee?
Yeah, that's the thing, because they really weren't, and that's a big reason that I'm kind of high on Davis going into next year. Is a big reason he sort of fell short of expectations last year is just the extreme rate of passes that he dropped. I think he had 6, and obviously he only played about half the season. His previous career high was 5. So he was way above his frequency of drops compared to what we're used to. So it was an outlier, and I'm expecting him to, come back to the norm this season, and he should add a lot more production onto, his production really wasn't that bad last year when it was all said and done. I think he had about 55 yards per game. He had 4 touchdowns in 9 games. So it wasn't that bad. And if he could just get the drops back to normal, he'll tack on a few more catches that he didn't have last year. And he could put up good numbers as the number 2 to Moore. But yeah, that drop was concerning. So you'd like to see Davis get things cleaned up. Other than him, though, I don't feel like I've heard a lot about drops from the main guys. So I think Uzama has had some drops actually. So that's probably something to monitor. Not in this scrimmage, but I do feel like I've seen multiple times some reports from him. So that will be something to keep an eye on. But overall, I don't think it's a huge concern just yet. But before we move on, I do have to comment on Tyler Conklin. I feel bad for not mentioning him earlier in terms of what stood out to me for the rest of the team, because man, this guy was the star of practice, and it's cool to see. I kind of feel like I'm rooting for him, especially more so than some other players, just because I've been high on him. I know Joe Blewett's been a huge fan of him, so it's a little selfish, but no, that's a silly mentality. I'm gonna drop that. I'm rooting for everybody, rooting for absolutely everybody. But with that being said, it's cool to see Conklin kind of showing what I think, at least what I saw on his film and his numbers. And I think a lot of his fans among, the Jets fans who have, seen him as a good under the radar addition. It's just interesting to see it all transferring to the practice field right now. We'll see how it goes in the real games, but it's seeing him sort of emerge as an early favorite target, not the favorite, but a favorite target of Zach Wilson's is, I think it's a sign of things to come. I really do. Because just the route running on film is so solid. The way he gets out of his breaks, the way he sets guys up, so smooth. The blocking is technically sound. It's all there. And the hands are obviously very effective. So he brings a lot to the table. I really think that I put out this tweet a couple of days ago, but I really think he has a shot to be their number 3 receiver in terms of targets and catches. I think he has the potential to do that just because of how many bonus opportunities he's going to create underneath that the average tight end wouldn't, because, a lot of tight end catches are just, they run a curl, they sit down, nobody covers them, dump it off, or they go into the flat, or they block and release. And, any tight end can make those catches, but sometimes you get covered man to man. Sometimes, sometimes you get covered man to man and you have to create the window yourself. And Conklin can do that. And we saw that a few times in this scrimmage. That's what allowed him to have the production he did in this practice, is that he was winning by himself. He had that touchdown from Zach Wilson in the red zone. Jordan Whitehead had a man-to-man, just quickly beat him on the slant, easy money. There was a seam ball he caught. Didn't necessarily beat anyone on that one, but you mentioned the fade out of the slot. There's another man-to-man situation. So this guy can create his own offense, and I think that is going to make him a big part of this passing attack. So it's been cool to see him really show what I think show what you see on his film and kind of is under the radar. If you take one glance at him, he doesn't seem like the most I don't know. You just look at Tyler Conklin or his stats, and his contract wasn't as big as Uzama's, and you don't look at him and think he would necessarily be the most skilled route runner or dynamic receiver or anything like that, but he really can be that kind of player. So it's been cool to see him establish himself so far.
Yeah, and Saul talked about him as a run blocker as well, which is I think something that we weren't necessarily. Well, look, I mean, the pads have only been on for a week now, so we'll see how it translates to games, but. I think the way I've looked at these tight ends is, okay, maybe Uzama's the better inline blocking tight end. He's going to bring you probably more on the yak side of things, but Conklin's the guy you can flex out wide. Conklin's the guy you're going to target in the red zone, those man-to-man opportunities, those deeper tight end routes. And I think that is probably what you'll see, but if Conklin's bringing it in the run game too, the potential for the Jets to run 12 personnel, especially as defenses get lighter, as defenses go more towards the nickel to defend the passing league, it's really going to open things up because what this offensive line and this running game is capable of. But when you can build a passing attack off of it, which really hinges on the tight ends, you go look at George Kittle and what he's done in San Francisco. If they're getting production out of that spot, it'll open up this entire offense. So like you said at the beginning of this, we're going to hop into the mailbag. Super excited with what we've seen for the first 2 weeks of camp. I just don't want to jinx anything. Knock on wood. The injuries will come. Let's just hope that it's not anything too severe. I know like DJ Reed's dealing with a hamstring, and I know Connor McDermott went down, but I honestly don't think McDermott was going to make the team anyway. So yeah, there's some questions in here that, it's like, okay, it's August. We don't want to overreact too much, but we'll try to get through this. I think we have like just under 15 questions, and we've just spent some time talking about the green and white scrimmage. So Michael, we'll see. This is the promise we make every time. We're going to fly right through this. And then we spend like 10 minutes on the first question. So We'll see how we do this. But first question, he's got 3 in here, but we separated them a little bit from @sports_fiend, otherwise known as the GOAT. Which part of Zach Wilson's game have you seen developed the most during training camp so far? What has been your favorite Zach Wilson play during this offseason so far, and why? I'll start. I think, first of all, favorite play definitely has to be that bomb where he's rolling left to Elijah Moore and just with that flick of the wrist, and you just really get to see the arm talent. Outside of that, it's hard to like pinpoint a play in a practice where anybody can't hit him, but that was the one play that you really see like, wow, this dude's arm is next level. And those types of plays only pop up a few times a season, most likely, those opportunities. But the fact that you have a quarterback that can make that happen and can do it so effortlessly is exciting. But what part of his game have I seen him develop the most? So this is something Salah talked about, and it's hard for Eddie fans to really get this, but you've seen Salah talk about this and his teammates talk about this, but his cadence in the huddle and his command at the line of scrimmage, I think looks better. And if you listen to the coaches and the players, it's certainly better. He doesn't seem like he's as outmatched or overthinking things. And I think you're going to see that translate to games a lot when he can get to the line and he can, you're going to see less of those complete breakdowns in pass blocking because a lot of times it's the quarterback and the center's job is to set those protections. And it's a part of the quarterback's job that I don't think you really get to see, or that you don't really see talked about a lot, but it's certainly been an issue with plenty of young quarterbacks for this team where it's just like, you're going to get caught every once in a while by a great defensive coordinator, but it's like, the amount of times where there's just a wide open free rusher coming up the lane and people blame the offensive lineman. It's like, well, okay, yeah, that he ran right by that offensive lineman, but his protection might have been something different. He might have been told to slide right, and then somebody went unblocked. So I don't know about that part yet, but it certainly sounds like his cadence and his command and his understanding of this offense has improved, which is what you'd want to see. That was one of the things that I was kind of excited for in 2020 with Darnold. Was he, to me, seemed like a guy who would play his best when he just wasn't thinking, when he was just playing backyard football. But 2018, he's a rookie getting to the NFL, learning a new system. Then 2019, he's a sophomore, but he's trying to learn a new system. And then he gets sick right at the beginning of the season. So he misses some valuable reps. And then it was like, all right, 2020, obviously the Gay system isn't great, but he's finally going to have some comfort in a system. He knows, he understands, he knows what they're looking for on each play. He knows like, all right, this is our play call and we see this coverage, this is where I'm supposed to go. If we see a different coverage, this is where I'm supposed, all these different things that you don't get the luxury as a rookie coming into the NFL, really not getting much of a break between the draft process and to when you're on the team. And starting games, so the fact that he's just had a year under his belt, he just seems more in command. His head doesn't seem to be spinning. He just seems like he's getting to the line, understanding what he sees, going through his progressions quickly. I think that's the biggest thing that I think I'm encouraged by. It doesn't mean like he's going to be like that every single play, but the more reps we see where it seems like Zach Wilson is in control, Zach Wilson knows where to go with the football, Zach Wilson isn't hitching at the top of his drop. Those are really positive signs. And I think for some of the clips, especially in this scrimmage, you saw that. And that's the most encouraging thing you can see as a Jets fan. Michael, what about you?
Yeah, I think the timing has been, at least from the clips that I've watched, I think his timing has been probably my favorite part so far. I just think that the routine and easy stuff is getting done in a smooth and efficient manner. Last season, the easy stuff was not easy. And obviously that's problematic if you can't do the routine stuff at a very consistent level. But this year, at least from the limited view that we've had from the outside, I think we've seen a lot of examples of him just dropping back, getting the ball out where it needs to go and doing it accurately. So I think that's probably been my favorite aspect of what we've seen from him so far. Hopefully, as things go on, he can establish that consistency because, practice is practice. You have to show on the field that you can do it on a consistent basis. And then hopefully he can build off of that and work his way into creating more of those explosive plays once, he's really established that consistency with the easier things. In terms of my favorite play so far, obviously the most exciting one is probably that one clip that was shared of him basically making the pro day throw to Elijah Moore. So to pick something different from that, one play that stood out to me in the scrimmage yesterday is there's this one play where he rolled out to his right. It's a concept the Jets run a lot where, three options on one side of the field after a rollout, and there's a shallow
Flood
read.
concept.
Yeah, the flood. I was looking for the names, but yeah, the same one that he made a lot of mistakes.
Thank you, Madden.
Thank you, Madden. You might not have been able to make Bryce Petty our franchise quarterback, but you informed a lot of people on the X's and O's of this sport. But yeah, this is a concept that the Jets had a lot of problems with last year, or Zach Wilson had a lot of problems with. You look at the second Corey Davis interception in the Patriots game, and then various other times where Zach just wasn't making the right decision or delivering the ball accurately or on time. With that concept, it's designed in a pretty simple manner to make things easy for the quarterback. You have a shallow read, an intermediate read, and a deep read. To put it as basic as possible. And, he sometimes would be too aggressive, or there were even times where he'd be too conservative. But this play in the scrimmage, they were running a flood concept, and Jeff Smith was the deep read. I forget who's underneath. I think it was Conklin and Garrett Wilson. But yeah, the defenders sunk down, covered those two guys. Jeff Smith was clearly the right read, and he went ahead and made it, and he put a good throw on the money. Smith dropped it. That was one of the big drops that would have made his completion percentage and all that, which doesn't matter, look a little bit better. But yeah, I like that. I think that's a great example of the balance that we're talking about in terms of being aggressive and being a good manager of the game, because being a smart quarterback doesn't always mean check the ball down every single play. Sometimes the right decision is the aggressive one, and to see him read that play effectively and choose the deep read when it was the right one is good to see.
Yeah, definitely. And then in terms of things that those are the positives. We just want to see less of those I know you said like the easy stuff will come, but you just want to see less of those easy inaccuracies and the obvious misses. But you have to be happy with how he's progressing thus far. One more question on Zach. I think there might be another one, but for Matt Jets, with Rodgers being somewhat of a mentor to Zach, do we need to worry about Zach finding his way down to Peru for an ayahuasca retreat next? I will hang up and listen. This is, kind of unrelated, but when the whole stuff about Zach and Zach's mom's friend or whatever came out, Michael said to me, he was like, because we were like talking, obviously it doesn't really matter that much, but I think I'd said to you, like, well, do you think this means is this in the grand scheme of things, like a negative or a positive, just in terms of his perception, I guess. Clearly it's been done him some wonders for PR, I guess, but you're like, well, how many good quarterbacks have stuff like that happening to them? Then I thought about it. I was like, Tom Brady had stuff with his girlfriend and Giselle and whatever. And then you have Aaron Rodgers with his family and Patrick Mahomes with his family and Russell Wilson. And all of a sudden I was like, all right, all these top quarterbacks have some personal stuff. But in terms of what, Rodgers being his mentor, I don't know about his direct mentor, but there was that article that Albert Breer had where he talked about how it was actually before the week 2 game against the Patriots, how he called Aaron Rodgers and Rodgers, or I think Rodgers called him or whatever. And then Rodgers like, what are you doing right now? And he's like, well, I'm at the facility. It's like Friday night. He's like, I'm at the facility watching tape. And Rodgers like, what the hell are you doing? So I thought that was kind of interesting. Kind of just being like, you don't want to overthink everything. Just watch the film, take your breaks. You're playing a game. And I think you saw that translate to the field. But if Zach can just take any parts of Aaron Rodgers' game and implement it into his own, I think you have to be pretty happy. If it means an ayahuasca retreat, so be it. I don't mind. Michael, anything to add on that?
No, in terms of the topic of, is the drama positive or negative or anything like that? I know this isn't really related to the question, but like you were just talking about, I think sort of, because Aaron Rodgers has developed into one of the more interesting characters in the league, let's say. Zach Wilson kind of has his own little sort of persona developing, I guess you can say. But he had that clip from the practices that's going a little viral where he he had made like that. It was like straight out of a movie, just like this one-handed catch where he just like throws it up, sticks to his hand. That's pretty sweet. He's definitely developing like a swagger, like a swaggy image to the average NFL fan.
Well, that's what the players
if he turns good, he's going to be the type of quarterback who I think the average fan likes more so than they trash.
Well, yeah, with his play style, he's got the headband. He's in New York, and then it's like, yeah, you go click the comments on that video of him catching with one hand. It's like there's like 3,000 comics saying that he's got that dog in him. So it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny what that whole story did to change the perception of him being some like kind of rich, preppy Mormon to now, whatever it is now. But like you said, he has to be good for that to really take off. But
right. Yeah. But like we were talking about, I think, I initially, like when we were talking about it, I was like, I was kind of thinking, whether it's positive or negative. I was thinking, coaches always talk about, minimizing drama. Players talk about it. It's, one of the biggest cliches, and it does matter. You don't really want drama. It's definitely something that can be damaging. But, the more that I thought through it, and with you bringing up all those examples, when you really break it down, a lot of successful quarterbacks have dealt with similar, if not more negative. I mean, not that this is negative, but a lot of quarterbacks have dealt with very legitimately negative drama, like some of the guys you brought up. Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, Big Ben have had much
Tony
worse
Romo
situations. Romo, much worse situations than this. And then even if they're not negative, a lot of guys have had their relationship drama or whatever. So the more you think about it, it's probably more common to have this kind of drama than it is not to as an NFL quarterback when you really dig into it. So I don't think it's necessarily a positive or negative. It's not going to determine whether he can, complete a skinny post or anything like that, or, run the offense or set protections. Has no effect on those things. But I do think it is we're definitely seeing that's positive in terms of, I could see his confidence improving, and like the team has rallied around him. So it's a positive in that way for sure.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to lump poor Tony Romo in there with Ben Roethlisberger just because he was like dating Jessica Simpson or whatever. But like you said, like, look, I mean, he's in New York. These stories are going to come out. This is completely unrelated to the question, but whatever. From @sports_fiend, another one, Michael. This is an interesting one. Would you rather get sacked by Carl Lawson running at you full speed in the backfield, or get pancaked by Mekhi Becton during a running play, and why? I think we both agree on
Bechten, I think.
Yeah, because look, like if I'm the quarterback and Carl Lawson's running me full speed and he scoops me up and slams me on my head with him landing on me, that's a lot worse than, I see Bechten coming down. I'm a safety. I'm coming downhill to try to make a play. I see those just 2 sevens coming at me. I can just kind of slide out of the way. I feel like I can kind of brace for impact a little bit more than Carl Lawson. So I think, I don't know, I'll take Bechten during a run play. Both of them aren't ideal.
No, yeah, I agree. Like it's still not going to be pleasant. I mean, there's plenty of examples on his rookie year tape of, poor 200-pound DBs getting just driven out of the screen. So it still wouldn't be a pleasant experience, but probably more bearable than getting blindsided in the back by Carl Lawson. I mean, you also got to think, he primarily lines up on the right side against the left tackle. So when he's coming on your blind side. So you're probably not going to see it coming, and he's coming at full speed too. It's going to hurt probably a lot more than Bechten would.
Yeah, no, that just makes me think of, you remember that I don't know if you were watching by then, but the Jets had a preseason game against the Giants. It was actually the first game ever played in MetLife Stadium, where they sandwiched Eli Manning. I think it was like Calvin Pace came in from behind, and then like Jim Leonard came in over the top, and it just get huge gash over Eli's forehead, like needed like 18 stitches or something. Those are the types of violent sacks I think you can expect out of Carl Lawson. Mekhi Becton, he might block me under the water cooler, but at least I'm, I can save some sort of face there, I guess. From Fergus OB4, how urgent is the need to sign a backup swing tackle? I would say pretty urgent. And look, they had Dwayne Brown at the green and white scrimmage, which is, I don't think I've ever seen that. Michael, you were saying that to me earlier. It's like, have we ever seen a free agent like come in? I mean, they've visited practice before. I think Riley Reef visited practice. Yeah. But the scrimmage with all the fans there at the stadium, I mean, that's kind of a big step in a relationship between a free agent and a team. I think it's probably just coming down to money. It's pretty crazy that he was in the Pro Bowl, or I think he was a Pro Bowl alternate last year, and he's still available. I mean, I understand he's 37 and he doesn't sound like a particularly amazing scheme fit, but look, anytime you can add a veteran offensive lineman, especially when both have dealt with injury issues, it's urgent. I think Udoga and Mitchell actually held up okay in practice yesterday. Certainly better than Connor McDermott. I think Udoga's actually had, from what I've seen, a solid camp. I'm not saying like he's a starter or anything, but I think Udoga's actually come along okay to prove he's at least an NFL backup. And then Max Mitchell, he got the last 2 reps with the starters because Bechten sat out. who's just on pitch count. And, Mitchell obviously gave up some pressures, but he actually looked all right as well. With that being said, though, I think the Jets should definitely sign a vet swing tackle just with Becton's injury history. Fant has had some issues in his career as well. It's just nice to have. It's a position that you don't really want to be digging into the Adogas and the Max Mitchells. And then you get to the situation of like, all right, well, what happens if you then lose an Adoga? Or then you know what I mean? Then you get to really the bottom of the barrel. So, it's the Morgan signing last year. I think they'll get it done. I think it's just up to money at this point. But Michael, how do you see how urgent the need for a backup tackle is?
I think it's pretty urgent because, it's very likely that the Jets are, one of these starting tackles are going to miss at least one game. I mean, they're probably both going to miss at least one game. And that's not a slight on either of them. It's just the fact of the matter. Most NFL players miss at least one game. So this is a crucial second season for your young quarterback. And you just want them to be as secure as possible. And, with the current roster, if one of those guys goes down, then you're not left with the most promising option, to say the least. McDermott gave up 2 sacks in both of the games he started and finished last year. Edoga obviously hasn't been great throughout his 3-year career. And then Max Mitchell is, a 4th-round rookie who's going to need some time. So I think it's pretty urgent. I think, are the Jets trying to win the Super Bowl this year? No, but they do have a young quarterback. They're trying as hard as they can to supplement and support. And this is a key part of that, because whoever this top backup tackle is he's going to play this year, and he's going to play an important role. So I think it's something you need to take seriously.
All right, last one from @sports_fiend. He says, which position do you see the Jets need to have veteran depth the most to before training camp is complete? Pretty obviously it's tackle, but we'll talk about some other ones. Also, which positional battles intrigue you both the most as we head into the preseason? I think the cool thing about the first question, like you said, obviously backup swing tackle is urgent. I think they will get something done, hopefully with a Dwayne Brown early this week, something like that. But outside of that, I don't really think there's any positions that they need to add any veteran depth to, especially I would have said linebacker and offensive tackle. They've signed Quan Alexander. He seems to be having a good camp. And if they sign a backup swing tackle, there really isn't any other positions that I would say they need to sign depth at. And that's you have to attribute that to Joe Douglas. That doesn't mean the Jets are perfect at every position, but they have young, promising talent at pretty much every position, or a competent veteran starter that's getting paid money. So I would say the only ones that I could see the Jets like at cut down, let's say they sign Dwayne Brown, they get to the roster cut down. Is there a position where you could see them targeting a vet? I would say maybe interior defensive line. If like a good run stuffer who's a scheme fit slips free somehow, I wouldn't hold my breath. I think they'll probably go with somebody in-house like a Jonathan Marshall or a Denzel Smart, but just something to keep an eye out. We know the Jets love defensive linemen. And then maybe safety if a guy like LaMarcus Joyner were to get hurt. But outside of that, it's like I don't see them adding another receiver, another tight end. If they have actually solid offensive line depth between Feeney and Herbig, if they can add a Dwayne Brown. Backup quarterback, they already have vets at. Running back, they're good. So it's really just, safety, I guess, is the only one I would say. Other question for you, Mike. Which positional I think it's the first time I've ever called you Mike in this podcast, by the way.
I think so.
All right, Mike. New name. Also, which positional battles intrigue you
Mike
both?
White.
Mike White, yeah. Well, I think he comes up in a later question. We'll save on for that. But which positional battles intrigue you both the most as we head into the preseason? I would say, look, I don't think there's really any main ones for starting positions that aren't pretty obvious now that I think about it. So it's really the backup guys. And one that I would keep an eye out for is safety, because we know the Jets love to deploy those 3 safety looks. Joyner is coming off a season where he missed the entire year. I know the Jets are really happy with Jordan Whitehead, apparently, if you read The Athletic and what Zach Rosenblatt, I think, is the new reporter, what he was saying, how the Jets are like, how the hell did he shake free? But, when you get beyond that, I think a guy like Will Parks has been making some plays. He seems to be a positive guy in the locker room if you just kind of listen, social media. But, you see what he's tweeting about the team. He seems kind of like a very upbeat, positive locker room influence. And he's had picks in back-to-back practices. Elijah Riley was a guy they brought in last fall who made some plays in practice, and the staff seems to like him. I know he gave up that touchdown against Tampa Bay, but, whatever. Ashton Davis is a pick by this general manager, a high pick. They cut Jabari Zuniga, a 3rd rounder last year. then stash him on the practice squad. Could you see the Jets doing something like that again with Ashton Davis if he gets outplayed by a guy like Will Parks? Pinnock, I really like. So like the battle for the Jets' third safety, I think it seems pretty obvious that Joyner and Whitehead would be the starters, at least initially. I could see a guy like Pinnock overtaking Joyner as the season goes on. But that battle for the third safety and who sticks, how many safeties the Jets keep, I think that's the most intriguing one to me. There's some other positions, but I'll hand the baton off to you, Mike. Any positions that you think that the Jets could be curious as we get down to the cut down, 53-man cut down? And then what are the positional battles outside of safety are kind of interesting to you as we head into the first game of the season this week?
Well, I think for the first part of this question, in terms of where they could add veteran depth, obviously taking out the swing tackle position or backup tackle, because we talked about that already. Outside of that, I would say defensive tackle is a spot where they could look for some help. I don't know if I anticipate it because they just really seem to like the guys that they have, which personally I don't agree with too much, but they do seem to like, Solomon Thomas, Nathan Shepard, and some of these guys. So I don't know if I would expect it. And they already have done so much hole patching work, with Quan Alexander, if they can pull off Dwayne Brown, that, I'm not sure if they're just going to go around plugging every single hole, but I do think they can stand to improve there because they really need some run stopping help at that defensive tackle position. Because outside of Quinn Williams, I don't trust any of their defensive tackles on a rundown to consistently play a high level. So it's a weakness. And I think if they could find someone who's a scheme fit and provides at least solid run defense, they could be useful in a situational role. And then in terms of battles, I'm going to look at the kicker position. That's kind of heating up.
That's a good
because, Zerline was kind of taking an edge. Pinheiro had some bad practices. But green and white, Pinheiro kind of pulled back ahead. I'm pretty sure he had a perfect 4-for-4 outing, and then Zerline missed one kick, which I think was in the 40s.
Yeah, but Zerline did make a 56-yarder during the scrimmage portion, so that is something to keep. I think Zerline's still ahead, but it's close.
Yeah, I think Zerline's got the edge right now, but it was a good bounce back for Pinheiro to have that 4-for-4. So this one's getting pretty competitive. I think as we get into the preseason games, it's gonna be even in the sense that I feel like whoever takes the advantage in preseason is probably going to pull it out. Contingent on how many opportunities they get, because it's only 3 games, and if you're splitting the kicks, you might not get a ton of opportunities. So, depending on how that goes, but I think preseason is going to be pretty big in determining how this goes. But Zerline probably has, if it ended right now, it would probably be Zerline, I think.
All right, from @New York_Nick, say the Jets land Brown. Is this the best offseason ever, considering the draft and all the holes filled? Obviously, the potential. We got everything we asked for, maybe, besides another safety. The team, this team's roster compared to last year's is insane. I would agree with you on paper. When you look at this team versus last year, it's hard not to be impressed with the job Joe Douglas has done. But I'll say 2 things. One, way too early. Because like we saw, Carl Lawson was a great free agent signing last year. He's dominating training camp, but he gets injured, misses the entire year. And it's hard to call him an amazing free agent signing if he doesn't play a single game. So we don't know what this team will look like week 1 or as they get through the season or how they'll even perform. But on paper, you have to be happy. And then the other thing is you say the Jets land Brown. Is this the best offseason ever? The Jets having the best offseason ever in the grand scheme of things will not come down to Dwayne Brown. In retrospect, it'll be, in the future, looking back, it'll be how did this draft class perform? And then, hopefully a few free agents. But even if the Jets don't sign Dwayne Brown, but Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, and Breece Hall are cornerstones for your team for the next 5 years to come. Yeah, it's an amazing offseason. You could make the argument it's the best offseason the Jets ever had, but we don't know that till we get to the field. It won't be made or break by signing a backup offensive tackle. But clearly the Jets, this is the most aggressive we've seen Joe Douglas in terms of, thinking with that win now mindset without getting dumb and stupid and mortgaging your future for a bunch of veterans. He's still signing guys like Tyler Conklin or Jordan Whitehead, sizable free agent signings, but they're young guys that can earn a second contract here in New York. There are a few other guys there as well. But obviously we've been singing his praises all offseason, from free agency to the draft, to even how he'll handle training camp with the whole cut down. Joe Douglas has done a hell of a job the last 2 off seasons, but it has to hit the field, and we haven't seen that yet. So I'll remain from referring to this as the best offseason ever until the Jets put a few W's in the column and we see how this draft class develops. Michael, anything you want to add there? Or you want
I agree. I think it's it comes down to results. Just a quick little thing, I promise. It comes down to results because I think we've been happy about a lot of off seasons throughout our Jets fandom. Maybe not to this extent, but I've definitely been excited before, and we don't necessarily look back on it that way because of the results that followed. So the legacy of this offseason and any offseason will come down to the results that they produce.
Absolutely. So, all right, from at Luke, I think it's Pellers, P-E. All right, whatever. Luke Pellers. Is there any chance we're overrating AVT? This is actually a really good question. He's talked about as a future star, but most metrics say he was fine, but not great last year, and his arm length would be a major outlier among elite guards. Michael, this sounds like something that's probably more up your alley. You're into the analytics. We've both watched every snap from the season. I would agree. I think AVT, his first game was kind of rough, but from that point on, I think he was certainly one of the bright spots on this team, at least from what I saw. I have seen some of the other metrics kind of underrate him. Or at least say he wasn't as good as we thought he was, especially when it comes to the passing game and handling stunts. But I think it was pretty clear to see AVT develop throughout the season and develop into a guy that you can be really excited about. But like you said, maybe he is. Some people, if a rookie has a good rookie season, I think the expectation for fans is, all right, this guy's a stud. This guy's maybe a future Pro Bowler. But then a lot of guys maybe just plateau or the league figures them out or whatever, and they don't reach that potential. Could AVT be a future star? Absolutely. Could he also kind of be underwhelming and not as good as we thought he was and maybe not worth the trade up? Sure, maybe. But the returns from year one, in my opinion, were overwhelmingly positive, and I'm very excited to see him continue. Michael, what do you think about that? What do you think about the analytics of him last year in the film that you saw? I know he talks about arm length, although AVT did play tackle at USC his last year, so he's got some versatility. Just what are your thoughts on the perception of AVT?
No, I mean, this is a healthy discussion to have, I think. And I'm a huge fan of AVT, but sort of like you mentioned, I think the biggest misconception with young players in, the NFL, but any sport as well, is the idea that they're just automatically going to progress on this same exact arc. Like, year one, you're a rookie, then get a little better every single year progressively. It does not always work that way. Absolutely does not. So I think we always assume that, rookie shows little promise. They're always going to get better. And, many of them do, but it just doesn't always work that way. So I do very much believe in AVT. I think that he had some of the best film of any of their young players last year. And he definitely had ups and downs in pass protection. There were some rough games in there, and that's where he needs the most improvement. But in the run game, I think he was already really good, like legitimately above average with a good platform to jump into maybe a top 8 to 10 right guard this year. So I think his run game film was great. And even in the passing game, go ahead.
I was gonna say I would say even higher. Talk about overrating him, but I think 8 to 10. Sure. I think if he doesn't improve, if we just get the exact AVT we got last year, maybe removing his rookie season, I think he's already an league above average guard. Yeah, especially compared to the guards we've watched. Alex Lewis,
for sure.
Greg Van Roten.
I mean, I just wanted to set the expectations a little more fairly, not say he's going to be top 2 this year, but he definitely could be that. I mean, he was a top 15 pick. You don't see guards get picked that high too often, and they traded up to get him. So he does have that talent, and you could see it on his film. Just like the good moments were really good, and his athleticism is excellent, and it's a great fit for the scheme. The way he's able to frame guys at the second level, whether when he's pulling, when he's just kicking out and trying to pick up linebackers, when he's leading on screens, he really does a good job of. The athleticism is good. He can get there quickly, but it doesn't matter if you don't actually make the block. But he can do it. He takes really accurate angles to the defenders, gets his hands on, and makes effective contact. So I think the run game film is already good. He can be very strong this year, but the pass protection is the question because the pressure numbers were very high for the most part. He did have some good games. I think he did improve as the season went along, but he does have to get better. And like I started this off by saying, it doesn't always automatically happen. So the improvement does have to happen first before he can be the player that the Jets drafted him to be and that Jets fans hope he can be. But personally, I am confident that he will make that progress because I just see it, in his play. I feel like it's not just just me presuming that he's going to improve because when he is on his game, the flashes of him knowing, having good technique and having good reps against good players, like the Falcons game, he was going up against Grady Jarrett, had some great reps. It was there. It's not like we're just saying, hopefully this first round pick gets better. Like you could see those flashes. They are there. It's just being more consistent. So I am confident. And in terms of the arm length, I think it definitely held him back from being a tackle. I think that's a big reason why the NFL, or at least the Jets, decided to move him inside. He probably doesn't have NFL caliber length to play tackle. He's at 32 and 1/8 for the arm length. Probably not tackle caliber, and it's still pretty short for a guard. But I do think it shouldn't be too much of an issue. I don't think it's as important for a guard as it is for a tackle. Zach Martin is 32 and 7/8, so only about 3/4 of an inch longer. Not much of a difference. So
it doesn't matter as much for me when it comes to guards for arm length. It matters a lot more in tackles because you have those smaller guys you're trying to get around the bend.
You're covering a lot more ground,
and you can
going up against better athletes.
Right, and you can use that length to preserve the pocket and push them around the bend. Where it's like when you're going inside, things are tight. You're trying to keep everything tight. That space can be kind of dangerous if you push. You don't really, as a guard, you use your length, but not to the same level a tackle would use his length to his advantage. As a guard, you're trying to keep things tight and really wall off an interior defensive lineman. It's just a lot different. So I don't really mind the analytics saying he's a major outlier among elite guards. I don't think it's a huge deal. So I guess just to sum this up quick, basically my point is I'm very high on him. I think there are legitimate reasons to be confident, but I think it is fair to say, let's see him make that leap first before we declare that he is a cornerstone piece. All right, from @Goth Bungie, from what you've seen so far, who do you think sticks on the roster as receiver 5 and 6, assuming 1 to 4 is Moore, Davis, Wilson, Berrios? Seems pretty obvious. It's going to be Jeff Smith and Denzel Mims. The only question is do they carry 5 or do they carry 6? The preseason games could change that. Maybe a guy like Calvin Jackson or one of these other kind of young, no-name type of guys and drafted free agents steps up, but I think those guys are probably more likely candidates for the practice squad. The one interesting thing, and Michael, I'll hand this off to you, is, there's been some talk about the Jets potentially trading Denzel Mims. I don't think it happens. Not because I don't think the Jets wouldn't, not because I don't think the Jets would do it or something. It's more so what is the return you're going to get on a Denzel Mims right now? His stock is at pretty much an all-time low. And so the reason you trade him now is because you really don't believe in him. And what do you think the Jets could get for him? A 6th? If you could get a 4th for him or something like that, which doesn't seem likely, but maybe a team like the Bears gets desperate and they loved him in 2020 and they think that scheme fit. I do think there is an argument to be made that Denzel Mims could be a good receiver in a different scheme because this one doesn't necessarily fit his skill set as much. I'm not saying he would be an amazing receiver, but his rookie year, he flashed for sure. So maybe a team buys into that and maybe you could get a 5th at most, but just the value you're going to get is not worth what you could potentially be giving up if this guy develops, just given the measurables. And he seems like he's come in hungry. He's working his tail off. He's had a good camp. Is he a starting receiver on this team? Probably not. But, how many times have we seen the Jets get down to, especially in November, their 4th or 5th, 6th receiver? He'll play. If he's on this team as receiver number 5, he's going to play. And he'll get his moments again to flash. So I would just keep him and see what happens. If he busts again this next year, then it's like he's really fighting for a roster spot, and maybe you can trade him. But I think what happens is he sticks. He flashes a little bit in preseason. He flashes a little bit in the season, and then you make a decision like, okay, is he flashing enough midseason to give him more reps, or is he just kind of flashing enough where it's like, all right, we can trade him in the offseason? But the question I was going to ask you, though, when it comes to Jeff Smith versus Denzel Mims, how do you evaluate that? And then 2, a guy like Jeff Smith, here's my feeling when it comes to the 53-man cut down, because you kind of have to play a game of chess here. In terms of maybe Jeff Smith is a better receiver 5 for the Jets right now. I don't know if that's true. It seems like they're really battling, but Jeff Smith gives you special teams versatility. I know Mims has been working with that unit, but Smith is a really good gunner. And Smith seems like maybe the better scheme fit in terms of he's the smaller guy, the shiftier route runner. He just can give you more in the slot or on the outside. But he's also doesn't have the name recognition that Denzel Mims has. And he's kind of a guy that I feel like the Jets could cut and then stash on the practice squad, and a team's not going to claim him to their 53, where it's like if the Jets cut Denzel Mims and tried to do that, I think a team would sign him to their 53. So do you think that maybe the Jets get a little cute and try to play some poker? And it's like, all right, well, maybe Jeff Smith is receiver number 5, but it's early in the season. We'll have injuries. Let's cut him, keep Mims, put Smith on the practice squad, sneak him through waivers, and then, as soon as there's an injury, we can add him. Do you think that they might play some of those gymnastics when you have a guy who's a highly touted second-round pick versus an undrafted free agent? And then how do you see that battle for the 5th and 6th receiver playing out between the two of them once the games get going?
I think that's definitely a possibility. I mean, you bring up a good point that, if they like Smith so much, I think you have a pretty good chance of sneaking him through waivers and getting him on the practice squad. But just reading the tea leaves, it does seem like that they like Smith, and he's probably going to make this team outright because, he plays on special teams and they seem to like his impact there. He's a good athlete and seems like a better scheme fit than Mims. So I feel like he's just going to make the team outright. And I think Mims is kind of trending in that direction too. In terms of trading him, I don't know, before this offseason or before this training camp, I was, he was so, let's just say he was so bad last year that it was almost to the point where if anyone was willing to give up value for him, I kind of was leaning towards let's take it. But it seems like, not that he's been great, but just, it seems like that he's kind of regained the trust of the coach, or not regained, because I don't know if he ever really had it, but it seems like he's sort of gaining the trust of this new coaching staff. Right. And that they're, they see him. I know he's still not getting first team reps and he's playing second, some third team and all that. But it just seems like he's been a lot more competent. And training camp, I think, you're showing in terms of earning trust from the coaching staff, it comes down to the little things. How do you run option routes? How do you get off the ball, your release? And those are the things he struggles with. We know he has physical talent, and that come game time, if the quarterback is to throw up a prayer to him, he can go get those with the best of them. If a scramble play breaks loose and he gets the ball in the open field, he has that speed to make big plays. We know he can do that, but it's just, can he master the nuances of the position? And right. Based on the way that it seems like the coaches are talking about him and, things are going along smoothly, there hasn't been any controversy with him. Like last year, it seems like he's kind of getting it down a little bit better. So I think he probably has more value to them as a 5th or 6th receiver than a 6th or 7th round pick probably would, which might even be a conditional pick if you trade him based on where his value is right now. And, we talked about with the backup tackle position, how, this season's all about Zach Wilson. You need that security. Just like you mentioned, once November, December rolls around, the roster is going to be beaten up. Backups are going to be in there. It's the same thing for every team in the league. Whoever that 5th, 6th receiver is, could be playing big reps by the end of the season. So it is still important. So I would probably bet on his up. Right now, I feel I'm leaning towards betting on his upside. And there's also the factor of, he's the only player who can kind of match what Corey Davis does. They have a lot of smaller speed guys and more Wilson, Berrios, and Smith, but Corey Davis and Denzel Mims are, your two bigger bodied receivers. So Mims is a better replacement for what you lose if Davis goes down. So it's not that Mims has been amazing this offseason or anything, but I think I'm leaning towards just keeping him around, betting on that upside.
It's an interesting point you bring up with him being kind of the only guy who can maybe fill Davis's shoes. Clearly the Jets are comfortable with a guy like Elijah Moore being your X receiver, but one of the things that you've seen and you can kind of see from these practice clips is they'll motion Davis inside and have him kind of as an H-back on running plays. And you saw them do that with Mims a little bit towards the end of the year because Mims has been such a good blocker. I'm curious to see how Davis handles that role with the weight loss that he's had this offseason. But yeah, the Jets most likely, or most of the time they're going to like those smaller, the shiftier route running type receivers. And you've seen that with the guys they brought in between Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson, and re-signing Braxton Berrios. But a guy like Davis is kind of key if you're going to have a running based offense, to have a receiver you're comfortable run blocking, and you can motion them in, and you can do a lot of fun things if you have a receiver who you really who's really excels as a run blocker. And that is the one part about Denzel Mims that I think he's been pretty consistent at. And Davis has been good at it in his career as well. But if you get rid of Mims, Davis gets injured, you don't really have that at the receiver position. I'm sure guys like Elijah Moore and Berrios can tough out a block, but it's different when you have a bigger physical receiver who can fulfill that role. For Mikey 516, and we'll try to speed through the last few of these. Are Mims and Bechten on the roster next year? Also, over under Mike White as a starter on the Jets at some point this year. I don't know what the over under what. Okay, look, I'll start with the first question, which is, are Mims and Bechten on the roster next year? Bechten, I think so. I don't see a scenario. I don't want to jinx it, but I don't see a scenario where he's not on the roster. I think he's going to have a solid year. Assuming he stays healthy, I think he's going to have a good year, and I think he'll be your starter next year. His ceiling is too high. His potential is too high to get rid of him at, ahead of year 4 now? That would be year 4 for him. Yeah. And if he's super bad, kind of the argument with Mims is like, the trade value probably won't line up, and you're not going to want to cut it. Like, his ceiling is too high. You saw the flashes too much as a rookie. The only thing that I could see with Bechten this year is, are the injuries popping up again? In which case I could see them bringing in another tackle to compete with him. But I think he's going to be on the roster fighting for a spot because his ceiling is too high. And as Robert Saleh said, the only person who's going to get in the way of Makai is Makai. So I think he's definitely on the roster next year. Mims, it certainly comes down to his performance this year. I would say, if a gut feeling, I'll say Bechten, yes. Mims, yes. I'll lean yes with Mims just because he's on the rookie contract, but Mims is certainly a toss-up. And in terms of Mike White being a starter at some point this year, I mean, look, we saw Josh Johnson take reps as a starter. Injuries happen. I would hope not. If Mike White is playing meaningful games for the Jets this year, hopefully we're getting the Cincinnati Mike White, not the Buffalo version. I don't think Mike White – I don't even think Mike White makes the team, in my unpopular opinion. We talked about that last podcast, so you can go listen to that. So just because we're trying to fly through this, but it's a numbers game. The cut down is a numbers game, and I don't know if it makes sense for the Jets to keep 3 quarterbacks. Mike White only has 1 year left in his contract. You can't keep him hostage forever. Flacco's outperformed him. Flacco's the vet. Maybe they try to keep 3. Maybe they cut him and try to put him on the practice squad. But I think most likely is they either trade him for a late pick or he gets claimed by somebody else, and he's not even on the team. But, other beat writers think that they're carrying 3 quarterbacks, so who knows? Michael, any brief thoughts on this question?
I think Bechten will be on the team next year. Mims, I'm gonna lean towards no. I think an off-season trade is probably more likely than this, than happening within the next few weeks. So I'll lean towards that. And then in terms of Mike White starting for the Jets this year, I'm gonna say no. I think I agree, and we described it last podcast. I don't think he's gonna make the roster one way or another. So yeah, I'm gonna say no.
Yeah, he still could make the roster, but I think
definitely.
My gut is that he doesn't. And then with Mims, it's like, I actually kind of think a trade is more likely maybe now the next offseason, because it's like receivers get injured. He could perform well in the preseason games and put his stock up. And then it's like in the offseason, if you're trading him, he probably didn't have a good year, so his value is going to be even lower. I don't know. Who knows? But I think, Mims is certainly a bit of a toss-up for next year. At Jack_Nadu 2, do you think we see more Michael Carter II in nickel, or Quan plus Quincy in base packages? So he's basically saying, do you think the Jets will play more nickel, or do you think they'll play more 4-3 when they have I think that's what he's saying. Yeah, Quan plus Quincy in base packages. And which option do you think makes us more competitive? Side question, has enough been done to fix the run D, considering we lost Foley? Thanks. With the first part of your question, Jets definitely will play more nickel. I think, what was it? They play base defense 30% of the time, right, Michael?
Last year, I think it was 20%. I'm going to pull it up right now, but I think it was 20% last year.
20%. So they're definitely going to play more nickel with MC squared. He's a guy that really doesn't get talked about that much, but he had a really very solid rookie year last year. And the other guy, and I think I saw Joe Blue tweeting this as well, but Javelin Guidry, his backup in the slot, I fully expect him to make the roster as well, because he's super underrated, and he's especially if MC2 goes down, I think you're comfortable with having Guidry in the slot there, or even in dime packages if you want to have two slots. So the slot corner position is one that never gets talked about on this team, but I actually think it's certainly a strength. And it makes it more competitive. It's a passing league. I love the blitz packages you can do out of nickel. But Quan plus Quincy and base packages is certainly an option, plus CJ. Is certainly more of an option as opposed to before signing Quan, where it was like, well, you're going to put Marcel Harris in there. You're going to put Jamie and Sherwood. I think, in those situations, those running situations, they're going to go with that 4-3 base. But I think you're going to see a lot of nickel packages, go single high shell, bring Joyner down into the box. So it's kind of like you're already running a 4-3 just with the safety as a linebacker. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And then has enough been done to fix the run D considering we lost Foley? I think the run D will be better. Saul has pointed this out as well, where, it was more of they allowed too many big plays, but in terms of efficiency, they were actually they were okay against the run. It was just that they had those big breaks too often, and that skewed the numbers a little bit. I think the corners the Jets have added and Jordan Whitehead, I think that'll help the run defense. I think Quincy having another year in the system, a full offseason, will help the run defense. I think having a healthy Carl Lawson and drafting Jermaine Johnson and pushing JFM back inside, all of this, I think their run defense will improve even if they lost their best run defender in Foley. And I think Quinnen's in for a big year. So Michael, what are your thoughts on that?
So the first part of the question, talking about nickel versus base, this is a really interesting one because, the Jets they're going to run more nickel for sure. Pretty much every team in the NFL does. It's a new primary defense in the league. It was 61%. Well, I believe it was 61% last year was the league average. So it's very commonly used to counter 11 personnel, which is the most common offensive package. And the Jets only used base 20% last year. But now with Quan Alexander in the mix, do you maybe throw out more 3 linebacker groupings than you did last year? I could see them doing that, but I think the more interesting question is, are we going to see some rotation with Quincy and Alexander? Because the interesting thing about, using those base packages is that, base is mostly used against, in running situations, against 12 personnel, against 21 personnel, when the offense has a heavy grouping on the field and you're expecting a run. So if you're throwing Quan Alexander out there as your third linebacker in these situations, it's not totally ideal because his skill set lends him much closer to the passing game than it does in the run game. He has a lot of issues against the run. I think that's why he's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. In coverage, he still brings, I think, a lot of potential. So that's what's interesting. Are they going to really run more base when Alexander doesn't necessarily fit the situation that base is used in? I'm not sure about that, but what we could see, I think, is maybe some rotation between Quincy Williams and Alexander. Like maybe Quincy Williams leans toward running situations when they still have nickel out there and it's 2 linebackers, and Alexander is used in some passing situations, replacing Williams to maximize Quan's coverage ability. So how they use these guys is going to be really interesting to watch because, Alexander doesn't solve the issues they had at linebacker, but he just brings better ability with some of the same skills they already had. So how they manage that will be interesting. Then in terms of the run defense, you pretty much nailed it. I think they did make some improvements, specifically in the secondary. Whitehead, DJ Reed, Gardner has the potential to be an upgrade. Jermaine Johnson on the edge. But they are still pretty soft up the middle, I think. So I don't see this being a good run defense, but it should be more respectable than last year.
Yeah, the big issue that this scheme, and this is going to get hopefully not completely exposed, but week 1, the Ravens are such a tough matchup because they do so many of those creative draws and traps and counter runs. And, you've seen it a few times in practice so far, and you certainly saw it last year where the interior defensive linemen, this year Quinnen and JFM, penetrate, they get upfield, but they're just run out of the play. I mean, they're just outblocked because it's a running situation. And so with that whole like all gas, no break sprinting every single play, you can get burned if your linebackers really aren't on their P's and Q's. And so a lot of the Jets run defense, the most important player in terms of the Jets run defense is CJ Mosley. More so, in my opinion, than Quinnen Williams or Foley Fatukasi would have been. CJ Mosley is the one guy that has so much on his shoulders in terms of run defense, because he's the guy that has to really be able to react to those situations when the offense kind of baits this Jets defensive line like a bull in a matador, cut upfield, get upfield, and then here comes that pulling guard who just wipes him out of the play. CJ has to be able to fill that gap. And I think Quincy having a full offseason in the system will certainly help that. And then Quan's a veteran who's played in this system, and it's a system that puts this amount of pressure on their linebackers. So I think the run defense will be better because of all those things. But CJ Mosley needs to stay healthy, because without him, I think this run defense takes a huge hit. From at Big Dogs 1318, do you think we will know if Zach Wilson is truly an elite franchise QB within the first 8 games this year? And if he isn't, do you think the Jets would go after someone in free agency before they draft another one in the top 5? The second half of that question is way too early. The answer to that is no. I think the performance in the second year is certainly really important. You want to see him take steps. If he is really, really bad in these first 8 games, granted, it's a tough stretch. It's a tough stretch of games. But if he's really isn't showing much improvement from the beginning of last year and he's really having a tough time, and this is assuming he's not having any of these games where he's flashing or whatever, he's just dud after dud after dud, I think it's a pretty good sign that he's not going to be the guy. If he just has a terrible first 8 games, obviously I'm still giving him the rest of the season, and then you can evaluate from there. But even if he's playing well in the first 8 games, I don't think you can anoint him as the starter. You're just looking to see Zach Wilson, like we said, the Tampa Bay Zach Wilson. That doesn't mean he has to be going off for crazy numbers or having a ton of Mahomes type throws, or that he can't even have bad games or interceptions. You just want to see him look in command of this offense, play with timing, play with rhythm, look confident. And if you're seeing that in the first 8 games, even if the Jets are 2-6, I still think you can buy into Zach Wilson. You just want to see some incremental progress, because year 3, I think, is really the deciding year. So much so to the point where after Sam Darnold's week 1 in his third year against the Bills, the first COVID game, Michael texted me immediately. You were really down on Darnold after that game, because you were just like, if he's still playing this analytically, he's just not. He'd have to be such a massive outlier. And Zach Wilson already is going to have to be an outlier, because Josh Allen is really the only guy that's, had the type of rookie year Zach has had and then took it to one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I think Zach certainly has that type of potential. I think the Jets are doing the right things to give him a chance to do that. But year 3, I think, is really the deciding year. Year 2, you're just looking like Allen week 1 of his second year was against the Jets, and he had 4 interceptions or 4 turnovers or whatever it was. He didn't have a great game. I know they came back and won, but if you remember, Josh Allen did not look good week 1, and look at Josh Allen now. So you can't judge too much off of the big early half of year 2 with all the new pieces and everything coming together. You're just looking to see incremental progress. You're looking to see him look in command and play with timing, and then you go from there. But to answer your question, no.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we're going to know. If he has a breakout, I think maybe you could crown him as one. I don't think that's going to happen, though. What I do think we are going to know within 8 games is where he is this year. And that's not to say he can't progress in the latter half of this season, but I do think we are, by the time the halfway point comes, we will have an idea of, okay, how much has he improved from year 1 to year 2? And I think from there, then you can kind of get a good idea of what his outlook is. Right. If he's playing at the same level as last year, then not that you want to give up on him that. I don't think this is likely at all. It's probably not even worth discussing. But if he plays at the same levels last year, it's not promising, to say the least.
Yeah.
But if he takes a leap to where it's he has some great games, maybe it's a down game every now and then, and overall the production is mid 20 to 22nd in the league, maybe close to 16, somewhere in that range, then I think you feel really good about his future. You still don't know if he's an elite franchise quarterback yet. Maybe he plateaus there over the next few seasons. But if he's around that range, by the time the halfway point comes around, I think you feel pretty good about the direction he's headed. And obviously he has to maintain that second half, build on it the next year. It doesn't guarantee anything. But if by the halfway point he's, producing at that sort of level, I think you could feel good about the direction he's headed to that point.
Yeah, I mean, and also I think if he, like you said, if he's at that halfway point and you've seen some of that progress, he certainly seems like you're more of the Tampa Bay Zach Wilson. Even if the Jets are losing games or he isn't throwing for 3 touchdowns, like if you could just see that clear progression, you have to be really excited about what the second half of his season could look like, because clearly the Jets' first half of this of their schedule is incredibly difficult. We'll see how injuries and stuff change that, but if he gets out of facing the entire AFC North. All 3 AFC East defenses are incredibly tough. He's going to have to play them all in the first half. And then the Packers and Broncos, 2 great teams as well. If he gets out of that and then he has those games against the Bears and the Lions and the Seahawks and the Jaguars and the Vikings, and like those types of games are really the types of games where you can see him take that next step. And by the end of the year, you could be really excited. So for me, when I look at him in the first 8, I just want to see competency, and I want to see that those steps, that he played at the end of last year, just say him take a few more steps. He doesn't have to take a monster leap to being Patrick Mahomes. Just like you said, get him to that 15 to 22 range in this first 8 games. And then I'm pretty happy and excited to looking forward to the second half. Because I disagree with you a little bit that we'll know exactly what type of quarterback he is this year in the first 8 games. I think, a young player like that, a young quarterback still trying to get games under his belt, they can improve a lot throughout the season. So if he's hitting that benchmark within 8 games, you have to be really excited about what the second half of the year can include after a bye week and against easier competition. All right, for Matt, pool party, baby.
I mean, before we move on, I mean, I'm not saying that he can't improve in the second half. I think it's more just that if he has improved by the halfway point, then you feel good that that he's improved this season. Obviously he could still get even better in the second half, but and you brought up a good point about the schedule too. I mean, some of those second half games are pretty appealing. I mean, the Bears look like a dumpster fire right now. I like the Lions, but they're probably a game the Jets can win at home. Seahawks, Jaguars. So there's definitely there is a soft schedule that he could take advantage of.
All right, from that pool party, baby, when the season ends, in which category will the Jets be ranked higher, passing offense or rushing offense? Rushing offense. I think the Jets will be a very good running offense this year. That's my prediction. And I think Zach Wilson will play off of that and have a good year, but I think the Jets will. I mean, look at San Francisco. Like, that's what the Jets are going to be running this year. And a lot of rushing yards, and then a quarterback who can capitalize of what the defense has to do. But between Breece Hall and this offensive line, I'll take rushing yards.
Rushing offense.
All right, for Matt Doggy Boy 4.
Did you like that answer? Literally just 2 words, no explanation.
Yeah, I know Mike was getting mad at me because I'm like, we got to move it along here. We got like 6 more questions here, and it's my fault. I ramble, and then Michael starts to go, and I'm like, all right, let's move on. So
can I give a short explanation for this question?
No. All right, for Matt,
put a timer on. 20 seconds. Right. 20 seconds.
Yeah,
this is my elevator pitch for this answer. Definitely rushing offense because I mean last year the efficiency of the run game was good. They were top half of the league in yards per carry. They just couldn't get the volume because they're in such big holes. I don't think they'll be in those big holes this year. Plus the additions they made to the O-line, to tight end, to running back, they're going to improve that efficiency and the volume. They're going to be a very good rushing offense this year.
You know what's funny? You just kind of sounded like me there. You just started talking way faster. The pitch on your voice went up. I like this. I like, normally you're we balance each other out well, but I think if we both, I don't think I think we balance each other out well. So maybe you're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be rushing you through these answers. It's a Sunday afternoon. What do we have to do anyway? Actually, there's only 2. 2 more. There's 2 more questions. My bad. For Matt Doggy Boy 4, how do you think the Jets' top 3 receivers will stack up among the best groups in the league? Michael, you go first.
They'll be pretty good.
Okay. All right. Enough with the joke. Come on. I was one text.
You said concise. It wasn't one. You said here. There are 5 messages. You said, dude, come on, concise. Okay, let's go. Come on.
Well, all right. That was that one part. There was one answer where it kept feeling like you were going to be done. And then, all right, my bad. That was a while ago, to be fair. All right. How do you think the Jets' top 3 receivers will stack up amongst the best groups in the league?
I think they'll be above average. I don't know if they'll make a play yet to be the best in the league or close to that, but I think above average is a fair thing to say. And I feel like last year we were kind of projecting that, and then it turned out to be one of the worst. But I mean, this year I'm really confident in Elijah Moore being a top 15 to 20 receiver, let's say, maybe better than that. I'm just trying to shoot low. I think Corey Davis could be a really good number 2 receiver next to Moore. But I think the questions, the limiting factors are beyond those two guys. How quickly does Garrett Wilson start out? How well does Barrios play in that number 4 role? The depth beyond those two guys. So there's a lot of potential, but I think for right now, I'm gonna keep it balanced. I think that it can be like a 12 to 15 wide receiver unit.
Yeah, I'll keep it concise. Let's go through every receiver group in the entire NFL. I'll start. All right, so the Dolphins. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think it comes down to Garrett Wilson. If Garrett Wilson is good as a rookie, like legitimate, and we've seen plenty of rookie receivers do this, and he's playing at that level, and Elijah Moore takes the steps that we think he'll take, then you just need kind of a solid veteran performance from Corey Davis who can do some of those things. You're not even factoring in Barrios as well. And this question eliminates tight ends and running backs. But if Wilson is giving you legitimately good production as a rookie and Moore takes those next steps, it's hard because I don't know. What do you think? I don't want to put a number on it. One of the best Jets receiving rooms.
If Wilson breaks out, or not breaks out, but has a great rookie season.
Let's say you put out. We could take some time on this because we have 2 more questions.
Top 8, I think, is fair.
But you
bring up a good point with Wilson.
Hold on. Go ahead. You put out a tweet. Look at this. We're back. We're out of whack. We took some time off.
Let's recalibrate.
Yeah, I thought we were like Conklin and Zach Wilson out here, and it's turning out we're like Corey Davis and Zach Wilson.
We're like Devin Smith and Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Exactly. You wrote an article this week, and you put out a tweet talking about how you think the Jets could split up their targets. See, I was setting you up here. How do you feel like when you take a look at that? I guess talk it through because maybe people haven't read your article. Take us through kind of how you thought about that, because I think that informs kind of how we view this receiving room. Let's say Zach throws 25 touchdowns, right? I think that's an easy number to kind of dial up, and I don't know. What do you think? 3,700 yards? Like, what's a fair amount of yards? Whatever it is. How do you kind of divide up the share among the receivers? We'll stick to just receivers. You've talked about Conklin having a good year and Breece Hall and whatever, but just among the receivers, how do you think their targets get divvied up? Because I think that informs a lot of how you look at this question.
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at this past few days, just kind of thinking about how they'll distribute targets with all these different players to account for. And you bring up a great point with Garrett Wilson being the X factor for this year, because generally you expect rookies to not necessarily struggle, but not be the most productive and then break out later. Like, look at the Bengals, for example. They had T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd last year, or 2020, and nice duo, but they were never mentioned as one of the best in the league. But you throw Jamar Chase in there, not that Garrett Wilson's going to do that. I mean, he could, but probably not. But you throw Jamar Chase in there, and now you're looking at like a trio that's really impressive. Now people love that unit. So they do. I think the Jets have the 2 in Elijah Moore and Corey Davis. And it comes down to when Garrett Wilson, or I guess if, it's not guaranteed, but when he comes along. So back to the point about the targets, I think. So what I did was I laid out the top 8 guys who I think will be involved in the offense and tried to guess how many targets they'll get. So, 4 receivers, Moore, Davis, Wilson, Barrios, plus the top 2 tight ends, Conklin and Uzama, and the 2 running backs, Hall and Carter. So I just went off that Wilson will throw 35 passes a game. That's about the league average, and slice it up that way. So here's what I came up with. I have Moore number 1 at 8 targets a game, Davis number 2 at 6, Conklin 3rd at 5.5. I have Wilson 4th at 4.5, Uzama 5th, 4, Hall 6 with 3, and then two apiece for Michael Carter and Braxton Berrios. So that's how I have it. You have any significant disagreements with that?
I think Berrios is a little low, but I guess you're just counting receiving. I think Berrios.
Yeah, I'm just talking about targets.
Yeah, so I think
he'll get more touches because he will get some rushing attempts.
Exactly. I think Berrios is going to be heavily involved in this offense to the point where I think by the end of the year, you might see as your top 3 receivers are hopefully Wilson, Moore, and maybe I should say hopefully Wilson, Moore, and Berrios. I think that is a legitimate possibility. The staff loves Braxton Berrios. Zach Wilson loves Braxton Berrios. Look at what Berrios did at the end of last year. I know you weren't as high on him as I was, I guess, but he was legitimately great last year towards the end of the season. And he was doing things in last, you could be like, well, okay, anybody could have ran that touchdown in that he had against Tampa Bay, or any small slot receiver could have run that little out route that he ran against Miami or whatever it is. But or I think it was an end around. I think Berrios is their jet sweep guy. Not that they can't run that with Moore and Wilson, but that jet sweep, that threat of it, especially with a guy you've seen do it, opens up the run game. So he's going to be on the field. And then, Zach Wilson has that chemistry with him. So I think Berrios is going to be a guy who continues to get plenty of targets. I think even more so than 2. But that's probably a fair place to predict him. But just my personal prediction is that Berrios remains a heavy part of this offense like he kind of was at the end of last year. Just because I think, the potential is there. The staff loves him. The QB's close with him. Makes sense. All right, last one from at TM Snowsill. If the Jets are good this year, you know what? We'll do it. We'll do the hypothetical, even though I know this is a positive, optimistic podcast, but I try to stay away too much from the hypotheticals, but we'll go into the hypothetical. If the Jets look good this year, Zach is top 15. Team finishes with 8+ wins. That's a big year. Does Joe Douglas go all in on the 2023 season? And then he put like e.g. cap magic, trading future draft picks. Yes and no. First of all, amazing scenario to think about. I would love it. If Zach is top 15 and the Jets finish with 8+ wins, they can miss the playoffs, and I'm still excited. I think you'd see Douglas kind of do what he did this year. It would look a little different because the Jets don't have, all the draft picks that they've had the last 2 years. And maybe they'd be more aggressive in landing a guy like a Tyreek Hill or more of a veteran. But this year, it's like, I think this is the mold that the Jets will try to follow. Some years they'll have more cap space. Some years they'll have less cap space. They'll have guys up for extensions. But you go into free agent, go into free agency. You look for guys who can earn a second contract in New York. Guys who are like 25, 26 that you can get at you look at Tyler Conklin and Jordan Whitehead, 2 guys who played really well. That get him at good value. Don't overpay him. They're not. When you look at the Bleacher Report top 10 free agents of the year, they're not going to be in that list ever, but they're good, solid free agents to bring into the fold. That's always the type of free agent that shines. It's rarely the guy who gets the record-breaking deal. It's always those mid-level guys, role players converted to starting players, or just regular starting players like Jordan Whitehead. Change of scenery, he really can take that next step. That's the type of free agents you'll see the Jets always sign. And the draft will always be handled by Joe Douglas the same way it's been handled the last 2 years, where if he likes a guy, he's not going to be afraid to go up and get him, but he obviously values picks. I think you're going to see a guy who works the board, takes the best player available. That's cliche, but I don't really see Joe Douglas ever being the guy to trade away future draft picks, like first-round draft picks, to bring in a veteran. There's just too much risk involved there. Could I see him trading like a third and a fourth or whatever? Like, sure, absolutely. But I don't ever see Joe Douglas parting with like multiple ones to go up and get, put player in there. I don't know. Michael, what are your thoughts on that? Does Joe Douglas's strategy change at all from last year if the Jets are right on the brink of a playoff spot? Or do you think it kind of see what we saw this past year, which is aggressive but measured?
Yeah, I think the answer to this question is a pretty resounding no, I think, in terms of, will he go all in on next year if they have this successful season? Because I think if the Jets have that kind of season this year, then there's a lot of implied improvement that you're going to get next year without doing anything. Because if Zach leaps that much, and if the team wins 8 games, and I guess it is contingent on where the production comes from in this, in however the scenario plays out, but most likely that production is coming from a lot of your core young guys who have a positive outlook going forward, who are still under contract, who are due to continue improving. So, and obviously, again, the biggest thing is the quarterback. If Zach's going to leap that much this year, then he's in a great position to become a truly elite quarterback the next season. So I don't think they necessarily go all in. I think having a season like that would be a sign that what they're doing is working, that they have the right core of players in place, and that they just need to ride it out and let the progress keep going, and then just keep supplementing it, like you said, with savvy free agent signings, kind of like the ones they made this year, except I think to an even more subdued point, because this year they didn't get the biggest names, but they did spend money. DJ Reed, Lake and Tomlinson were 8-figure deals. Conklin, Uzama were high 7 figures in terms of money per year. So they did spend pretty big this year. But next year, I think if they have this kind of season in 2022, the offseason's probably going to be more subdued than this year. I really do think that, because again, if you have this kind of season, it means the moves you made this offseason were the right ones. And these guys you have now are going to carry you forward. And now you just got to plug the holes and supplement them.
Yeah, I don't think you will ever see Douglas get complacent, especially like he was in 2020 when it was very clear he was tearing it down. I think he'll always be aggressive, but he's going to be measured. Like he's not going to be stupidly aggressive, but he'll get creative, and maybe you cut this guy and free up cap and get this, and sign somebody, or you'll see moves like that, like aggressive moves, like his trade up for AVT or his trade up for Breece Hall or trading back in for Jermaine Johnson. Like those are aggressive moves for a general manager. And I think the perception of Douglas, especially before Saleh was brought in, was that, okay, this guy's going to be like old fashioned, trade down, stockpile picks, conservative, but that's really not who Douglas has been. When you look at it, the last 2 off seasons, especially, he's been incredibly aggressive with his draft picks and with the signings of Carl Lawson and Laken Tomlinson and stuff like that. But like you said, like if the Jets have made that big of a leap, there's a lot of implied growth there. It is that window of Zach Wilson's rookie contract that they might try to capitalize, especially since they've had so many young players drafted in the last 2 years that if they're playing well, some contracts are going to start popping up. I think Quinnen's a guy that if he has a good year, he's going to get an extension. And then the year after that, you're going to have guys like maybe Becton's pushing for an extension. And then, then it's like the Zach Wilsons and the Elijah Moores and all these guys. Those are great problems to have down the road, but you have to kind of finance and budget and plan for it. You can't give out a bunch of long-term money right now, because in 3 years, when Elijah Moore wants a new contract, or 2 years, whatever it is, you want to have the money to be able to take care of your own guys, which is something the Jets haven't been able to do. But that is a long way away. We're just getting done with the green and white scrimmage. They have their first preseason game of the year on Thursday. Michael, I don't know. Do you think we'll have a podcast before then, or do you think we'll deciding this right on the air? I think this is how it should be done. Should we do a pod before? I think
this is Friday. Great business. Just make rash decisions on the spot for the sake of entertainment.
We could do is it worth previewing a preseason game, or is it better to just have the game and come back and have an episode?
I think let's just react to it. Subject to change. We don't make official decisions on the quote unquote air.
But we want to be consistent with the Mondays. That got messed up a little bit the last 2 weeks, and then obviously the offseason we were taking a break and stuff. But we want to be consistent with the Mondays. But then it's like, maybe we'll have that podcast probably Saturday, right? React to the game, record the podcast. I would imagine, then put it out the day after, and then who knows? We'll figure it out. But we will have something reacting the game, and obviously you can follow us on Twitter at CYJPod, or Michael _Nania, myself at Ben W. Blessington. We'll be tweeting about all sorts of stuff this week. Go to jetsxfactor.com, best place to go for Jets content. Tons of other great podcasts, articles, awesome website. Check it out. And then also, if you don't mind subscribing to the Jets X Factor YouTube, or writing a review for our podcast, whatever, all that type of stuff, all those plugs. Michael,
super enthusiastic.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and beg for subscriptions and reviews, but it's nice. It helps out the pod. I get it. Look, I've listened to plenty of other podcasts, and the host starts begging, and it's just like, all right, I feel bad, man. If you have the time, you don't mind helping out the pod, a review and a subscription is greatly appreciated. But so I guess we'll be back Saturday then. A little weird. Try to get back on the Monday schedule after that, I guess. But thanks to everybody for listening. Michael, last words. You don't have to keep this concise. You could filibuster for the next hour if you want. I was just trying to guess through the mailbag. We promise every time we're like, all right, we'll get through these questions. Then all of a sudden I looked at it, I think we were 3 questions in with 12 to go. And I was like, all right, we just spent 25 minutes on these questions. We should probably start to move. So my bad if you feel like I rushed you, but take your time.
I think it's cool to give some thought to each question, really, really digest it, give it the respect it deserves.
I agree. But when we're breaking down the flood concept of a green and white scrimmage in detail about every route the guy, it's like,
when you put it that way, it really makes it clear. Wow, this is some pointless discussion right now.
Hey,
when I was breaking that down, I thought this is a pretty good point. But then
it is. It is.
Wow,
it is. But yeah, put it in perspective. But no, it is. I'm sorry. I don't want to take Michael. Your magic is that you you're into this stuff more than anybody else is, and you go into the weeds and you go and find the stuff that other people are too lazy to go find. So no, I love it. I was just trying to, 3-hour podcast on a Sunday afternoon. I got things to do. All right. But outside of that, any last words, any last thoughts before the preseason game? Any predictions? Maybe that's a better thing. Preseason game 1, we'll see how much the starters play. What do you think? Should we?
I don't know. I guess we should, let's say some wacky predictions. How about a Calvin Jackson touchdown?
All right, dumb. No, I'm saying Zach Wilson leads a touchdown drive on his first drive. That's my prediction. His first drive, the Jets.
Is he going to play, you think?
I think he probably will. I don't think he'll play that much. Well, that'll be really
the first game last year, right?
Yeah, he did, but he was a rookie. And then also it's like how much I think he will. I think these reps are important for him. It's just, the whole injury performance staff, and the worst thing in the world is knock on wood, is somebody getting injured in these meaningless games. So I don't think he'll play that much. I think they'll give him probably a series or two, or maybe, a little bit. I think he will play probably that whole first half against Atlanta and then nothing against the Giants, especially since they have those joint practices for those 2 weeks. That's great experience. But I think he'll play a little bit against the Eagles here. You would think. So my prediction is he leads them on a touchdown drive, his first drive.
All right, I'll do a more exciting one then. Breece Hall will have a touchdown run of over 10 yards.
Maybe that happened. Maybe both of our predictions collide into one parlay, and he leads him down the field, and Breece Hall punches it in. Who knows? All right. I have one question, actually, and maybe I'll ask this later, that I was going to throw back. People aren't listening. The only people who are listening right now are the diehards, are the people who fell asleep. But I have one. Here's my mailbag question. I'll probably tweet this out. Best Jets bar in New York City for watching away games and whatnot. I'll be in the city this fall. I was thinking about it. I was like, you know what? I got to check out some Jets bars. So if you have any recommendations, when the Jets are on the road and where people watch the games in the city, definitely tweet us at CYJ Pod. I'll probably tweet that out, but all right, that'll do it for us. Thank you to everybody for listening. Wow, entering the third week, entering the first game of the year. Couldn't be more excited. Training camp off to a good start so far. Knock on wood. Keep the injuries at a minimum. Everybody have a great rest of your week. Go Jets.